Michael here, and in this video journal I'll start working on sound ports for the 3-piece walnut build that I've been working on, and also the rosewood that I'm building at the same time. So keep watching. So why sound ports? Well, a sound port, the hole in the side of the guitar, projects some of the guitar's sound back up towards the player. They barely affect what the audience may hear out front. The audience, however, is going to hear a little brighter sound than what the player hears because high-end frequencies are directional, whereas the low-end frequencies are omnidirectional. So a sound port can allow some of those higher frequencies up towards the player. So for the guitarist, a sound port can provide a clearer sound closer to what is heard out in front of the instrument. Well, with all the kerfing and the side reinforcement braces and the blocks and everything on, it's time to start working on the sound port. Both of these instruments will have sound ports. The sound port will be right here. Now, before I do any cutting in the sides, I would need to reinforce that area right there. The sides are only about 2.5 millimeters thick. So what I need to do is make a little reinforcing patch to protect that area that I'm going to be cutting the hole in. And this is the rosewood build here, which you haven't seen before. I've gone ahead and made the patch for it, and it fits right in here between the side reinforcement braces and the kerfing. Now this patch is made up of 2 pieces. These are the 2 pieces that I'm going to be using for the walnut build. This patch for the rosewood build is about 16/1000 of an inch and is made up of 2 pieces. One was the piece of rosewood, and the other one is a piece of fiber that does not have a grain pattern to it. Now the patch itself is oriented so that the grain of the patch runs at a 90-degree angle to the grain of the sides. So this is the one for the rosewood. I've got that ready to glue in. Now I'm ready to start making the patch for the walnut build. So I have a piece of walnut, or this is actually the gall because it didn't have enough of the sides left over from this walnut build to make a patch big enough. So I'm using a piece of Nagall, which is Peruvian walnut, with the grain oriented 90 degrees to the sides. That's 40/1000 of an inch thick. And then I have a little piece of fiber, and this piece of fiber is 20/1000 of an inch thick. So this way I'll end up with a patch that's about 60/1000 of an inch thick. And after I make this patch and glue it into the sides, I'll have a side thickness that's around about 4 millimeters thick, 3.8 to 4 millimeters thick. The first thing I did was make a small gluing guide to glue those 2 pieces together. That's the same radius as the sides are right through there. So this is just 2 little pieces of wood, one little piece of wood that I laid on the side, marked it, sawed it off on the bandsaw. It's got a piece of shelf liner on it here just to kind of keep it padded, protected so that the glue won't stick to it. And I'll use a piece of wax paper on the other side. So since the arm bevel is going to go right here, my guide matches up with the sides so that I can form that patch to fit right there and match the curvature of the sides. Fortunately, since I'm going to be gluing this patch in with the grain running in this direction, the little piece of wood that I'm using for that is going to flex much easier that way than it would be this way. So I have that working at my advantage. So all I do now is make sure that my clamping guide is oriented in the proper direction. Put some glue on here. I just want to make sure that when I glue this piece of walnut in here that I'm oriented correctly and not end up bending it in the wrong direction. And just to make sure no glue squeezes through that and gets on my clamping caul, I'm just going to put a little piece of wax paper right there. And then some clamps. Alright, I'll just let that glue dry, and then when it gets dry I'll fit it to the section where it's going to go inside the sides there, and then I can glue it in. Well, my sound hole reinforcement patch is dry, so I can go and take it out of the mold. So I've got the arch of the guitar body now in my patch. Now I just need to trim it down to fit right into here. So making sure I've got it in the right orientation with the grain running 90 degrees to the grain of the side. I'm just going to stick it in here, and first I'm going to go ahead and trim the width of it by marking where the kerfing meets it. And then I'll just connect these lines with a little ruler. And then I need to transfer the lines around to the back side. I'm going to take this over to my scroll saw and trim down to those outside lines. Okay, well, with my width cut, now I can start doing the length. I'm going to mark that side reinforcement brace location. Okay, and once again I'll take this over to my scroll saw and trim to those lines. Well, I've spent some time sanding and forming the patch to fit right where I need it to be inside the guitar. And it's right in between the kerfings and the side reinforcement braces. The grain is running 90-degree angle to the grain of the sides. All I need to do now is just put a little glue on it and go ahead and glue it in. Okay, we'll take it off the mold. And I'm just using some fairly thick acrylic clamping cauls to provide even pressure. Okay, so I'm just going to let this dry and then I can start on the next process. Well, I've got the sound port border cut out for the rosewood build, and now it's time to go ahead and cut out the sound port border for the 3-piece walnut, which I'm actually using for this video series. I've got it set up over on the CNC table. I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out, and I'll show you when it gets done. Okay, well, this is cut out. All right. Well, I've got my sound port patch installed on this 3-piece walnut build. Right in through here. And it's time to go ahead and start cutting the hole and installing the sound port reinforcement border. But the first thing I want to do is I want to mark where my side reinforcement braces meet that section. The sound port is going to be between these side reinforcement braces. I'm going to go ahead and locate the center. And this is the little guide that I've made that fits the curvature of the guitar right into there. I want to make sure that I locate my sound port in between these lines. It doesn't matter if it's actually right in the center or not. Actually, further up is a little bit better. Now I can take my template, making sure that I'm centered, and clamp it in place. So I've got everything centered where I need it to be. I can't see my line, so I'm below this sound reinforcement brace on the inside. Now I'm going to go ahead and scribe an outer circle with my blue pencil, and then an inner circle in red, slightly offset. And with a little sacrificial board on the inside, I'm just going to drill a couple of holes, touching that red line. And then take my coping saw. Well, with my hole rough cut out with the coping saw, I need to go ahead and get as close to that blue line as I can. So I'm just going to use a little sander. Okay, and I'm really close to my blue line on there, which is where the border outside will be. I'm going to go ahead and put my template back on. Now with everything lined up and tight and secure, and then using my Dremel with a very small plunge router bit with a little bearing on it, I'm going to follow the inside of my mold and just carefully nibble away the rest of that. I spent some time fitting my border into the hole, and I've got a pretty tight fit, but it'll go all the way down in. Now to glue it in, I'm going to use a 2-part epoxy and a little bit of wood dust that's the same color as my sides. And I'm just going to coat the inside. Put a paper towel down there in case I get some dribbles. I've got a really snug fit, and the glue is going to act as a lubricant to help me push it all the way down in there. I'll glue around the outside all the way around. I've made a mark on the top of my inlay border as to where I want up front. And I'm just going to kind of stick it in there, twist. Okay. All right, that'll work. I've got it to where it's protruding on the inside as well. And so that's the top there, obviously. And then on the inside, I've got it protruding enough so that I can trim it down flush. I've already done the rosewood build. And so there's the rosewood border in, and it's been trimmed flush on both sides. So once this one dries, we can get it to this stage, and then I'll be ready to work on the next step on these builds, which is actually going to be starting to close the box. Well, my epoxy has dried on the sound port inlay, and now I want to go ahead and trim it down. So I've got a little piece of vinyl here, which is fairly thin, and I've cut the same circle out on it that I have on the sound port. And I'm going to clamp it in place. It'll protect my sides while I'm sanding down the border. Well, I've sanded the sound port border down using some hand sanders out on the inside and a couple little chisels. And I've got everything down to where it's flush with my sides. Here on the outside and on the inside. So this set of sides is done and ready for the next step, which will be closing the box. Well, that concludes this video journal on sound ports. I've gotten both the sound ports installed on the 3-piece walnut and the rosewood bodies. Next step will be closing the box. If you enjoyed the content of my channel, please hit the subscription button and the notification icon. And if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link down below where you can do that. And thank you all so much for watching.